So once again, hello everyone. Thanks again for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be talking about today is how our guest landed her first UX role. Pretty exciting. Um, we have invited an awesome guest who is a seasoned UX professional by now and has a lot of experience in the field, who has hired people and will share lots of insights on this with you and answer questions. And we'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. We help people who know UX basics and want to transition into UX. Our program is a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that helps people, that provides a guaranteed way to become highly marketable and land a UX role. So unlike most traditional boot camps or career programs, we allow our participants to build real experience, strong real client portfolio, crucial soft UX skills like UX team collaboration, client and stakeholder management and presentation, and master the UX job search and interviewing necessary to actually land a UX role, all in a collaborative community and fun environment, and under the guidance of industry practitioner mentors from top companies. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just to give you a bit of a background for credibility purposes. The company is headquartered in New York City, and we have run many virtual cohorts and helped over 160 people or so get hired into UX roles. And we'll tell you a bit more about our virtual program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. And of course, that part is completely optional for you. All right, so here's some actual companies that the grads have been hired by. There are many, many more. So we have seen essentially lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. All right. So Stacy, it's great to have you here with us. Thanks again for joining us. I'm really excited to have the discussion with you because I know you have quite an interesting story overall, and I'm also very excited and very fascinated, kind of very intrigued by your fast progress afterwards as well. And yeah, so really excited to discuss your story, whole transition into UX. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself to our audience? Maybe like 30 seconds or so. Now we'll dig in much deeper after that.
Of course. I'm a product designer. I work with an analytics company that's based out of New Jersey, and it's a lot of it's a generalist generally, but research from research to sending that stuff out the door and everything in between.
All right, awesome. You're so modest, Stacy, as usual. All right. Okay, and just a reminder for everyone in the audience, right? So if you have a question, please use the Q&A tab. So if you're new to this Zoom setup, there's a special Q&A tab that you can use. So don't use the chat for questions. Use Q&A. Again, this way we can prioritize all the questions and keep track of them easily, etc., and then make sure that we answer the ones that you guys are most interested in. All right. And please also try to make sure that the questions are actually related to the topic, right? So usually a good idea. All right. And just as a reminder, we'll make a special announcement about the program we're running closer to the end of the event, and we'll also share the career transition roadmap summary handout slides. So stick around if you'd like to get that. All right. Awesome. So Stacy, let's start from the beginning. So where were you, what were you doing before you decided to transition into UX?
I was working as an art director for a startup based out of New York. There was a lot of web design there. So this is just before I went into UX. Web design, but also environmental design. This is a very highly visual job. There was a lot of there was a lot of like building either, things in person or just building websites or collateral information. And it was generally around the marketing, in the marketing area and in brand development. So not only just building that collateral material, but also like leveraging a new brand and what that looked like and defining those standards. So that's where I
Mm.
started. I mean, well, that was the job just before I started going into user experience.
Yeah, yeah. And tell us a little more, like, why did you decide to, why did you want to get into UX? Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably had a lot to do with my personality. I love, I love. I'm a very visual person. I had a fine art degree before I went into graphic design. Um, but the general approach in marketing is you tell people what to think and kind of what you want to say. You have a brand voice, you have a message, and it's more about how you present yourself. Or it was a different approach. It was more like um, there was no testing of ideas. It wasn't about what people were experiencing so much. It was more about what we were telling them they should experience. And that's not necessarily always the case, but uh, the thing that really drew me into user experience, to answer your question, was that it was more data driven and it felt more um, data driven, meaning like it wasn't the loudest person in the room, their idea of how to do things. And so I appreciated that thoughtful consideration about, why we were doing what we're doing and or why the UX people were doing what they're doing. They always felt like they had a lot of information about why they made the choices they did. And I loved that part of it. It felt like the decisions that were made because it was helping somebody rather than some other reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay, awesome. And tell me, what were some of the biggest challenges for you in the beginning? Like, let's say you're working as art director, right? And you
Mhm.
decide to switch into UX, and what were like the initial, and we'll dig into much more detail about like all these phases of your journey, kind of mapping back to that diagram that we covered. Um, but initially, like, what were some of the biggest challenges?
Um, it was a different way of thinking, right? It was very process oriented, and um, it was just a very different approach to thinking about problems and solving problems. And I think that shift in mindset was, you know, it, it's a shift, right? So it's something you have to kind of move towards. And um, in the beginning, since being such a visual person, I would, make recommendations about changes, say, to a component or to an interface, and they seem to make sense because they were easier to use, let's say. But if it's like a drastic change, that isn't the best user experience, and there's a lot of research that shows that will cause problems in workflow, and I didn't quite, I didn't quite get that. I really did want it to, because I was working with a slightly legacy product at first. It really looked kind of legacy, and I didn't love that about it, but knowing, like finally realizing it's not about like I don't use the product, it's not about me necessarily, it's about how the people are using it and how they need to have the information the way they're used to seeing it and making small changes. That was a little bit hard for me, because
Mm,
there was a lot that needed to be done.
okay, okay. And how did you first go about this transition? So let's say you decide, okay, I want to be in UX. What did you first do, like, to trying to get into it?
The first thing I did was a lot of research. I didn't want to. There were a lot of options available to learn UX. You could go back to school, you could take a boot camp, like there's so many options. And I knew I had a bit of a visual background. There's a lot of experience that I had that was transferable. And I also wanted to make sure that I picked the opportunity that would give me the you know, most likely to be successful. And so I just started with research and picked the best option based on that.
Okay, okay. So let's talk about specifically a little bit about hard skills, right? So how did you go about building those actual Word or technical UX skills? And in your opinion, what are the most important ones that employers look for?
I think the hard skill, it would depend on what area of UX you're focusing on. So for me, I was, I didn't plan on spending a lot of time with research. It ends up that I do spend a lot of time in research, but I went about getting those skills just by, I knew I had to learn some sort of prototyping software. At the time, there was a lot more options available. Sketch was out there. Figma was like out there, but not quite as used. And there were a few other options too. And so just like deciding which one to use and getting better at it so that I could spend less time thinking about how to design something and more time just doing it where it was second nature. And I think you're going to need to know how to, you're likely going to need to know how to prototype unless you decide that you want to be purely a research oriented or, um, so I would say, yeah, learning how to use the tools was important because you're gonna have to build something sooner or later. And then also like the researching skills, how to ask questions, understanding where, like there's a lot that goes into learning how to be a researcher and how to remove bias and ask questions and to make people comfortable, when you're talking through the things you want to learn. And so I would say those two things were really important for me.
Okay. Okay. All right. And how about soft skills? Like in your opinion, how did you go about building those? Or I assume so you already had a background, so you already had some experience. And also, in your opinion, like what are the top soft skills that hiring managers look for in more junior candidates, and how can one get those?
Yeah, I think when I'm looking for soft skills, I really do want someone who thinks critically and thinks about a problem to solve rather than understanding that it's a process and that there's a problem. There's more than one way to solve a problem and not latching onto a single thing, right? So being open to feedback, being able to think through options, being curious, those kind of soft skills where I mean, I guess on a broad scale, it's just being able to communicate and relate to other people, especially in UX. It's really critical to be able to make connections and understand what people are saying and what they're not saying.
Okay, okay. Anything else on in addition to?
And well, communication is so layered. I would say the ability to articulate your design decisions and present your work with confidence and why you made choices, but also be open to hearing, other thoughts and not, being able to separate yourself from your work and be able to think about it from this is a work product perspective and not fall in love with your decisions and your work.
Okay, okay. Do you also have any tips on breaking into UX without professional experience?
I would say what worked for me, even though well, okay, without experience, I I would say your network is really, really, really important, right? And I think that um, talk to people tell them about your goals and what you're trying to do, and then also think about your experience that you have and how that relates to the field, so that you can pivot those skills into you know sort of a foundational base for your user experience, professional persona.
Okay, okay. So that's good. So tell me a little bit more. Like once you decided to get into UX, you did all that research. All right. What was your first? Then I also want to talk a little bit more about building experience and case study after that and like what you did. But what was your initial like first step? I mean second step, I guess,
Yeah.
after the research.
Well, I did the research. I decided on the option that I wanted, and uh, I ended up doing I think it was a sort of design test, a quick design test to see, because there was a lot of people that were interested in joining the cohort. And I got in, and the thing that I loved about it was that it was a smaller group. It was very personalized. And I got to work with other people that were trying to get into the field with varying degrees of experience and in varying areas of like focus, right? So some of us were better at like would have better skills in research, some were more visual, some, like, and it was nice. And because I was in this group of people that had varying skills and experience, we learned so much from each other. So that's what I was hoping for. Like I knew it was going to be something that would probably be online, and I wanted to make sure that even though it was decentralized, that I still had a team that I could learn from and work with. And I cannot say enough about that. If you, the opportunities that you will have from other people that you're working with that are trying to get into the field, or your network, or whatever, however you decide to surround yourself with other people, you can learn so much from them. And I would highly recommend making some sort of somehow figuring out a network for yourself so that you can learn and grow. And there's a lot of people out there that will offer their time or their expertise. You just have to sort of ping them on LinkedIn and just feel them out. And I guarantee you that they'll be open to helping you out.
Okay. Okay. And how did you go about building real experience so you could transition into UX?
The cohort, or the class, I don't know really what to exactly call them. The experience what I had was, it was a real life project. So that experience in itself, like, it was real world experience. So through that, I got real world experience. I also, I did a few classes with, different opportunities where you could just do these classes online. And I had some case studies that I had started working on with that as well. But it was the experience in the class with the real clients was invaluable, because theoretical case studies are nice. You can to a certain extent you can showcase design skills, right? But you're not necessarily uh, running into changes in scope and how you deal with that. Constraints around, say, tech stack, or whatever kind of constraints that you might run into in the real world, and then learning how to pivot based on those experiences. And that in itself gives you like an excellent story to tell when you're presenting your work, right? You don't, hey, I was doing this with this client, these things came up. We weren't quite sure how to figure it out, but due to, these decisions that happened, this is the output, and this ended up being better because of that. And, like, you can really tell a real story when you have a real case study with a client, which you don't really have when you're doing a theoretical sort of case study.
Okay. Okay. And basically, so before doing our program, I think you mentioned you also, um, I can't recall. I remember we had this long consultation with you.
Yeah.
This was years ago. This is quite some time ago. And I think you told me, I don't remember all the details, but I think you took some other courses at first, I
Mm,
think, right? To
I did.
basically to build up some of the hard skills and understand the concepts, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you remember which ones? Do you want to tell, or not really, or?
I don't mind telling. I Interaction Design Foundation had a great, sort of, they had a great framework that you could use. And it was, it included mentors as well, but it was very, um, it was very singular in your approach. Like, you could take as much time as you wanted to a certain extent. And then, it was also like you yourself building this, like, you didn't have the team and the collaboration and the mentorship outside of that one person, say once a week or whatever, that that I like, I know myself, and I know I need a little bit more collaboration. I'm very collaborative. I want to get feedback and refine based on other people's, yeah, thoughts and ideas. And so I did do that that interaction design foundation course, which was very helpful, but it just wasn't enough for me. I needed more to feel confident that I, when I was in an interview, that like I really felt like I could do the thing.
Okay, okay, awesome. Yeah, based on what I've heard, I've heard that IDF or Interaction Design Foundation can be like a great way to learn some of the concepts. I know they have like lots of courses and like lots of topics. It could be a great way to learn the fundamentals, learn the basic, the concepts, get some hard skills potentially, etc. So that's what I've heard. And by the way, also to just clarify to everyone, so even though Stacy did our program, right? But what we're gonna cover is not specifically the program, of course, right? But what exactly she did and what she worked on and how she worked on it and why it worked and what she, maybe liked or didn't like and um, how that actually led to where she got to, right? Which is landing her first UX role, right? So that you could do something. I mean, of course, you could apply to our program if you want, but you could potentially do something similar on your own if you'd like, right? Just if you don't need the help, etc. Um, so, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the real experience that you gained, kind of before you were able to land that first UX role? Maybe about the project, the case study. This you don't have to go into like tons of detail. Just summarize it.
You mean before I joined the cohort, the BeginX cohort?
Before, during, like all the experience you were able to gain, or like in the program, what you did, what the project was like. Um, why it worked, what you could improve, and what you did before, if you did anything in addition to that as well. Because I know you're kind of an exception, right? Usually people need many more case studies, right? So, but in your case, you had the arts director background, and I think you only got one real client case study, right? UX real client case study, based on what I remember. But correct me if I'm wrong, and then you can you'll tell us the rest of the story later. But I think it's so. If you guys can do something like that, this is like the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah, I did. And I already had because I was an art director and I had a portfolio of that kind of work. So it wasn't like I had that foundation stuff. So I had a framework for my portfolio. And I will say that I did change that completely when I shifted to UX, because how you present your work, if you're, a designer or an art director, is very different from how you would present a case study for user experience. But let's see. So I'm just trying to remember the question because I feel like I kind of lost the thread. But
Yeah,
if
yeah. Just to tell us a bit more about the project, the experience.
right. Yeah, the project was, like I said, it was a real client. I think there was like 3 groups of 4 or 4 groups of 4, and we were all working on different piece of this product that needed to be, it needed either feature enhancement, additional functionality, or like net new thing, like a greenfield thing. And my team was part of this, like, hey, we really need to develop something brand new. It needs to be kind of a dashboardy type of thing. And so it was a great part of that project because it was, it had, and I think everybody did this to a certain extent, but it was like coming up with concepts, doing a little bit of groundwork research, coming up with concepts, putting those concepts in front of users, testing them, then building, like more high fidelity prototype. But it was that whole understanding a brand new problem space. And this was an education problem space, something that I wasn't completely familiar with, but we had people on our team that were, which was helpful. And then just going through each step of the process in like dealing with real people. And that meant like everything from like writing scripts to scheduling appointments to having those interviews, then, like building the prototype collaboratively, which, in itself it can be a little bit of friction if people have different ideas about what things should happen. And that was also a great learning experience. Um, and then changing it based on the feedback. And then we all also then worked on our case study together, right? Our approach was a little bit different because we took different areas of building that product piece. So I would spend more time doing this one piece. Another team member would spend a little bit more time doing this other piece. Mine tended to be more visual because I had such a visual background, but having, like I can't say enough about having a real world challenges that you had to pivot because I do remember at one point that the decision was whether we were going to modify an existing experience or come up with a brand new experience. And we really were like, it was a fork in the road. We had to decide based on the information we got, and we did completely pivot. And I think we were a little behind schedule because of that, but we ended up making the time up in the end.
Yeah, I remember. But that was, did that add like an interesting story to when you talk about your case study and interviews?
It did. And I have to say that, in this scenario, like let's just say you have one real world case study. There is a opportunity there if you're doing the entire breadth of that sort of from generative research to like delivery of a prototype and then handing that off. You can split that into 2 case studies if you need to, right? Here's this research case study. Here is the design case study. And in some cases it's a lot of work, that might be better.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. And tell me a little bit more. So before you landed your first role, right? So how many case studies did you have? Like what was it mainly that real client case study from the program? Did you add any other UX case studies there?
Yeah, I had two other case studies, and then I had also done a couple of, like, in between, sort of cohorts or, the program with beginnings and before that, I had, applied to a few jobs and was asked to do design challenges as well. So those were sort of like mini case studies too. So I had those. I really I think things like that are valid if they showcase us, and you can refine them, you can showcase the best skills that you have. I wouldn't recommend putting something in there just because it's there. It really needs to be good.
Yeah. I know you're good. Making it, I love your portfolio. I don't know. I honestly like this is like one of my favorite examples that I like to share. Um, all right. And by the way, just to remind everyone, if you have questions, please put those in Q&A. Don't be shy. Again, no question is stupid. Again, we'll cover a lot of additional kind of areas and phases and Stacy's journey in more detail. But if, as we're discussing different topics, like if you have some questions, don't be shy. Just put them in Q&A and we'll try to get to all of them, hopefully. All right. Okay, let me see what else I wanted to ask you. So, Stacey, for you personally, what do you think, in your opinion, what were like the top 3 things that made your UX portfolio effective?
I'd say getting the storytelling right is important. You know, you, so it made my portfolio kind of well. I showcased the work in the beginning. Like on the front page. I sort of broke it down so that it was very easy to understand what I was going to show. Like this case study has, it does A, B, and C, and you can click the case study to learn more. It really gave a high level outline of what to expect with the 3 of them. So one's product design, say one's research, one's responsive, blah, blah, blah. But I made sure to let the person reviewing the portfolio what they were going to see and the problem it solved and my role in that, that work, so that they could easily skim through it, right? I'm not introducing like friction points in the beginning. So they're just like, oh my God, it's too much to read. So, make sure that you make a point clearly and succinctly. And I think I learned that just from my art direction background. And also I did a ton of other case studies and just copied the stuff that worked and just like jettisoned the stuff that didn't. So it was like, I kept lots of notes and screenshots and stuff and links to other case studies and that I thought were effective, and I would, like, write why I thought they were effective. And I just stole a bunch of things like that. And then, I had section that had my visual work that showcased my fine arts background and also, my design background. A lot of it was web design, and I think having that a little bit lower so people could see the breadth of like my expertise or my experience was helpful too. And then I told them a little bit about myself in an about area so that people, if they wanted to make it, if they, if I could make a connection with someone, I think sometimes that human connection, like I love dogs or I'm great at throwing axes or something like that. Like people will see that and read that and they'll feel like, maybe I want to learn more. So making sure that it was clear and easy to get through. People, when they were clicking links, they knew exactly where they were going and what they would see. And then once they got to those case studies, they were defined in a way that told the story in a way that was engaging, right? And that isn't always I started here and I ended here. It almost never is that.
Yeah, that's good. And also, like, yeah, that you mentioned that you researched basically. So you kind of use the UX process in a way to understand what a UX portfolio looks like. All right. And that's what I suggest to a lot of, like on these consultations that I have with lots of people to help them transition. Um, when we talk about, or like if we talk about that area, I always suggest like researching the best practice, like don't reinvent the wheel. All right. Instead, just look at the best cases, best examples, and then just synthesize and then customize it for yourself. So that sounds like what you did, basically.
Yeah, I absolutely did that.
Okay. Awesome. All right. And I think we have, so Anne Marie added a couple of questions. And by the way, if I mispronounce anyone's name, sorry, that's not intentional, obviously. So Anne Marie, let me know if it's Anne Marie or Anne Mary.
Mhm.
We'll take your question in just a second. Stacy, so if we kind of flip that, what were some of the biggest mistakes that you think you made in your portfolio?
Um, I think at first, like it was refined pretty quickly, but at first I was finding that, like I was reading through my own case studies and I was getting bored and it was just like I didn't tell the story in a way that was engaging enough, right? It was just too long, and I think knowing what to keep in and what to keep and what to leave out or where to break it up so that you have, two case studies if you have to, and even have a link, say research case study below or something, click here. But, just make sure, like my big mistake was that the story wasn't engaging enough and it was just too long, that was a problem with some of my case studies, and, that was I would say that was the biggest thing.
And how did you fix it? Just make it shorter, make it more succinct. Maybe have a summary at the beginning.
I think I've heard this a bunch of times, and actually I agree, with this statement, so I'll say it. Really show the completed project as your, like show the solution. Say, hey, this is this amazing thing that happened. The problem was this, and this is how we, and you're always part of a group, got there. And you can highlight your areas within that work. And then it doesn't have to be linear, it can be um the story of how you got there, but it doesn't need to be, it cannot be a protracted story. Like, we really don't necessarily need to see your persona development in there if it's not really relevant to the solution. I know we have artifacts, they're tools to help us understand and get to a solution, but that doesn't mean it has to go in there unless, building a persona and you spent months and months building a persona is the actual case study. I would say think carefully about the stuff you're showing because a lot of that information, though helpful to you, is not helpful in selling you to them. And that's really what you're trying to do with your portfolio and your case studies. And and it should just be an introduction, right? You want to get their attention, you want them to call you, and then you can talk through it a little bit more. It doesn't have to have everything in there.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Um, all right. And in your opinion, one more question before I take Anne Marie's question here. So in your opinion, what let me know if you have any thoughts on this. In your opinion, what types of projects are most effective in one's portfolio? And for you personally, maybe based on like your experience so far, because you probably, I know you have quite a bit of experience in the field by now, right? How can you actually tell hypothetical projects from real ones when you're reviewing case studies or portfolios? So yeah, I do want to talk about that a little bit.
Um, I um, I would hope that if it's a hypothetical case study, it would be, it would be defined as such, right? I mean, they're fine, right? You can do a hypothetical case study. They're great, right? Because you're still solving a problem, and quite often when I see them, the people that are presenting them are pretty clear about that's what it is. So, um, I when I'm looking at these case studies, I just want the person to think about the experience I'm having when I'm looking at their information, like their work, and what did they want me to know about them, and say it in a way that's clear. I'm not answering your question. I feel like I didn't quite capture. Ask the question again, Michael. I apologize.
Yeah, yeah, no, it was a good start. I think it was a long question, right? So basically, uh, the first part is what types of projects you think are most effective in one's portfolio? Um, Hypothetical, real. I mean, I guess real is probably common sense, right? Real is typically more effective, but anything else you want to add to that? And then if you can actually tell, if you can, like, if you're reviewing someone's portfolio and maybe they read some Uber feature or something like that, right? So how can you tell if something is real or hypothetical if it's not explicitly covered?
That's a good question. I think when you're looking at um, when you're looking at a case study, you're connecting more than just looking, you're connecting dots, right? So if you're looking at their portfolio or their case studies, you probably have their resume. And if they don't have anything about Uber in there and they have an Uber case study, those two things don't compute, right? Like I don't normally have a problem telling the difference between a hypothetical and an I would say, the few things that it's important to not sell something that you can't do. Like if it feels like you're copying something, please just don't do that, right? It's just dishonest and um, it's not going to work anyway. And I would say also think about you- make sure that the language you use actually resonates with someone in the industry, right? So, and I'll give an example, and this might not be the best one, but it is one because I just recently saw this. If someone's selling themselves as and has experience as a researcher, let's say, or as a generalist, you don't want to say user research and then uh, usability testing as two different things. Like research is a thing, right? And you can have, I can do user research and I specialize in moderated usability testing or statistical analysis or whatever that is. But all of those kind of fall into an area of research. And if you're writing skills down that feel a little bit like jargon and that you might not quite understand how these things connect, um, that's for me, yeah, something to ask them if I decide to talk to them or something that might just like, this doesn't seem completely honest to me.
Yeah, and that can basically say something like about the candidate, right? And
Yeah, the depth of experience, right? Because, if there was more experience, that probably wouldn't happen.
okay, okay. So let's take Anne Marie's question briefly, and again, just a reminder for everyone: don't be shy. Use the Q&A tab. Put all your questions there. All right. So Anne Marie is asking, as someone with a fine arts background, how did you market yourself and find connections in the design industry? I have a fine arts background as well, and it feels like the marketing versus arts communities don't overlap often.
Um, I was lucky enough so that my fine art background did overlap pretty much with my marketing because I would use a lot of I did a lot of logo and branding, like that kind of thing. And I was lucky enough to work with a company that had a variety of like it was a parent company, it had a variety of like sort of sub brands. And I could do, like logo creation using watercolors, and some of this stuff is in my portfolio, or colored pencils or whatever, and or hand drawn typography, and they would all be part of that. It was fine art skills, but they were used to develop a brand or expand a brand. Like if it's not the logo, then it's sort of the collateral around that. You know what I mean? So that there's an opportunity there, right? So, and if you say want to make a logo for something using your fine art skills as just a hypothetical example or something to put in a portfolio, you can do it that way. As far as the sort of the mindset, fine art in my fine art was always just like, I loved doing these things. I loved like black and white stuff and charcoal. And I would do that for myself or, for family members or whatever. And it was very personal. Whereas like with the commercial art or the marketing or branding, it was always like, it was fun to do, but it was very specifically for somebody else and something else, but it's still the skills you have with your line work or, like how your sort of own style can show itself in that. I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think depending on who you're working for, you can offer those skills as an added value, and stand out for that reason.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So, and Marie, let us know if if you have any if that's answer your question, or if you have any like follow-ups or clarifications you want to make. And by the way, she also asked if can you drop a link to your portfolio with a smiley. So maybe don't worry about it now, but maybe Mika, if you're able to find Stacy's portfolio, then we could, or Stacy, if you want, you can just share it later, whichever works better.
Please. Let me just say one other follow-up thing, because I did just think of this. Your fine art background does give you a lot of these sort of, they call them the Gestalt sort of principles of user experience design, where it's very visual, and you can leverage you'll have a better understanding of those principles because of your fine arts background, and that stuff will be more natural to you, like spacing and proximity and color and all these things that are really important when designing intuitive interfaces. You're going to be drawing on that fine arts background.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. All right, so I want to also to kind of finish it off with the case studies question, right? So anything else you want to add in terms of why you think it was important for you to have real client case studies in your portfolio, not just hypothetical student projects? Any differences? I think what you mentioned so far is basically you actually worked with a team, right? You had the client, you had constraints, you did the whole process start to finish, not just working and sitting there by yourself, but like doing all the like interview scheduling and talking to users, etc. Right? Anything else you want to add in there?
In as much as coming out the other end with a portfolio piece, like a case study.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you have real world experience, you can tell the story a little bit better with, say, with permission, with screenshots and quotes. You just have a more robust sort of things to draw from to tell that story that you wouldn't have if you're working alone. And then you also don't have that peer review. If you're just doing a case study, now you may have your case study peer reviewed that you didn't do with a real world client, but there is more likely going to be, it's the storytelling. If I'm talking to someone who is coming to me for like a junior level, entry level, whatever kind of job, a user experience job, and they haven't had the real world experience of like coming into constraints or friction points or whatever you want to call them in the trajectory of this project, I don't know how they're going to handle that if they've never experienced it. And if they can talk through that in their case study, because the case study is just a conversation starter where people can get to know you, how you solve problems, um, you know, all of those things like that story that you can tell is it's such a better story if you can talk to something that's real world. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. Maybe that makes sense. Um, let's talk briefly about LinkedIn and resume. Like, what do you think made yours effective? Like LinkedIn, resume, what do you think helped in that area with getting you hired, and maybe any additional tips you want to share on that?
Uh, well, I would say peer review your LinkedIn and your resume, please. Just peer review everything. I just saw recently something that wasn't, and there were a lot of issues, that you sometimes you're blind to your own problems. And if you don't peer review your stuff, so peer review your LinkedIn, peer review your resume, and then also just make sure that they align, right? You don't want your resume to say one thing and your LinkedIn to say something different. You want to make sure that you're speaking with a sort of singular voice, and that voice is towards the goals that you have as far as user experience, and then maybe the specialty within that. Um, I was lucky enough that the cohort of the, the classes that you what do you call this, Michael? Like what should I call it?
Program. We say cohort program.
Program.
Sure.
Helped us,
We
right?
don't one thing we don't do, we don't call it a course usually. So,
Yeah.
because it's much more than a course.
So much more. I apologize. It was great because we could we could practice interviewing. We could use our resume. Our resume was refined through each other. Um, it was all crafted to tell a story, and also make sure that experience that wasn't necessarily around user experience could be um, shown through the lens of how that will make you a better user experience person. So if you are really great at managing people or whatever, people skills you have, you can use that to highlight research skills or, um, you know, project management skills, that kind of. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that's cool. All right. Let's talk briefly about like search methods, right? I know there are like lots of search methodologies. Sometimes we call them like job search channels. Um, which ones did you use, and what got you ultimately hired?
Oh,
And let me also clarify
yeah.
that, right? By methods, right? For example, I mean, like, could applying on company sites, or applying on
Mhm.
job boards, or recruiters, or networking, informational interviews, friends, social networks, etc.
Gotcha. Okay. I cannot say enough for my network. My network is almost always what's gotten me hired. Um, in fact, I was trying to prepare for an interview with like I called someone in my network. I was like, look, I have a big interview coming up. Can you please let me do this interview with you? I want to present my case study, etc. And this colleague, um, was like, "Sure, but can I bring my boss with me so we can both you can just pitch it to both of us?" And I was like, "Yes, fine." And I actually almost said no because I was really nervous about doing it in front of his boss. But I was like, "Just, do it." And it turned out that they offered me a job because I was just sort of prepping with them, it might have had something to do with it. I was less nervous about it. I was a lot more myself, and it was an easier conversation. But I would say the opportunities that might come up if you use your network. So the answer is network. That's how I did it, right? And it's almost always how I do it. Now I have gotten job offers from from dealing with recruiters. It can be a great resource. Just they have their good things and they have their bad things, right? As most things. But so yeah, recruiters have helped me. I also have applied online and got job offers that way as well. But you have a lot less insight into the culture, and I think for me, culture is really, really, really important. And I would say the more insight you have um, into that, the better.
Mm. Okay, well, that's fascinating. I mean, you just wanted to practice, right? And you got a job that way.
Yeah, yeah,
That was your first job, right? That's your first UX job.
yeah. Well, it wasn't my first UX. Well, it was my first actual working for someone, not as a contractor, not as a UX contractor,
Ah,
right? So it was
okay.
my first. Yeah, this is going to be a job.
Okay. And what about the first contractor, UX contractor job? How did you get that one?
It was also to a network. They're like, "Hey, I need help with, I need help with this." It was it wasn't it wasn't through me applying for anything. I think I'm lucky enough to have a pretty big network based on, just my experience. And so yeah, through my
Hmm.
network.
Okay. Okay. No, that's awesome. That's
Mhm.
yeah, that's yeah. I love that story. See, I was gonna say like she's bringing a boss, not your future boss.
Yeah,
That's even better. Like that's even more practice for you. It makes it even more real, right? So.
right. And yeah, and yeah, I can't say enough for like knowing knowing the team a little bit, right? Going blind does make it a lot harder. You
Hmm. Okay. So that's cool. Yeah, and that's based on our research. That's the insights that we received as well, right? Is even most of our alumni basically got their roles through networking, right? Or reaching out, building those connections. That's what we emphasize in the program, especially now, and like even more than before. Or recruiters reaching out to them, right? But for that, you first need to really build out yourself, your product, your search assets, etc., for that to start happening, right? Because that's more challenging in the beginning, right? So that's all right. All right, and I see Eureka. So I know you put your question in the chat. So if you can, please, if you have more questions, I will take this one because I see it right here. But if you have more, please put those in Q&A. So Rika is asking, how are case studies that were part of school projects, but real client briefs valued on the recruiting end? Have you had any experience with that? Maybe hiring candidates like that or like reviewing candidates like that that had these and Rika, maybe you can provide like some additional detail in the chat. You mean like when, because I've heard some universities do that sometimes. Basically, they invite like a representative from a company, right? And they give you a brief and you kind of work with them, right? But you don't, they not always look to implement all the work. So I'm just wondering if that's what you're referring to. So just let us know in the chat. And yeah, but any thoughts on that?
Um, that to me still feels a little bit hypothetical. It's um, it's I actually don't know if that's a real project or not. So I'm guessing or real, like a real client where you're doing all of the things, right? But there's nothing wrong with those. I think those are excellent, just as long as you're showing, your curiosity, your problem solving skills, um, and your degree of capability with the tools, like the hard, like those, whether it's Figma or a spreadsheet, if you're doing research, like whatever it is, like it doesn't necessarily have to be real world, though those are the best in as much as you can speak to them in interviews and it really does show your full, it shows you more fully. But I would never discount someone because their work was purely like no real clients, like just write them off. And I just so long as um just so long as you're showing, like the really important skills of being a UX professional, which is like being curious, asking questions, like trying to understand a problem space rather than just pumping out like screens, like that don't necessarily solve a problem, but they're a screen, right? Like that kind of thing. Like I don't I will look for something like that. Like if it looks like it's a really pretty solution, but it doesn't solve the problem, then there's that, right? I definitely want to see some problem solving skills there.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Erika, just to add to that as well, um, it also depends. Like, we would need you to give us a little bit more detail in terms of like what you meant, because based on what I've seen, some colleges actually partner their students with like a real company, and they give them the brief, and they actually have an intention to implement that stuff. That's more rare or less frequent, basically. What I've also seen some colleges do, especially master's programs in UX, the good ones, usually what they can do is um, they invite someone from a company, and then they have all the students kind of work on the project from that company, and then the stakeholder, or like whatever you call them, representative from that company, kind of give them feedback. So it's like it's better than purely hypothetical, but it's not exactly real, right? Because it's like nobody's really planning to implement anything, and it's just it's good you get that interaction. So it's better than purely hypothetical thing, but ideally you want to basically have a team. You want to actually, you want the stakeholders to actually plan to implement your work, right? So, and I see you clarified something. Okay, so you say my master's from Parson was a mix of both, two implemented and four stakeholder based. Okay, okay, so it's like a mix of the two. Yeah, the ones that are implemented, I feel like those can be great, absolutely, right? If you actually work with the client, if you work with the team, you work with a stakeholder, you have that experience, ideally the case study is robust and kind of covers the key phases, like maybe not all the phases. Ideally, the more the better, typically, for like a more robust case study. So it sounds like it could be definitely a strong case study if it's something you can also list on your resume and LinkedIn, right? So it sounds like, Stacy, any additional thoughts on that?
I think you did a great job. I agree with you 100%.
All right. And we have another question from Anne Marie here in Q&A. So Anne Marie, I'm going to come back to this in a sec. And Erika, thank you for clarifying that as well. Stacy, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your interviewing process? Like what it was like for you and what was the hardest parts, maybe for the first role and then for the second role potentially?
Yeah. Um, okay. It really depends on who's doing the interviewing. Like it was, the companies were very different. And my first interview was just like so awful. I felt like crying afterwards. Like I seriously felt like crying afterwards. It was very, even though I was new, I was still trying to, I made some mistakes in my case study I probably shouldn't have put in there. Like I was trying to beef it out too much, and they were just like, "Why is this in there?" Blah 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 blah. Like so. Um, and I guess that's important to say because really, when you're putting your case study together, please be thoughtful about what you're putting in there and why, so that you can speak to it. Don't just put something in there because you think it looks good, or because you think it'll beef up your case study. But um, I just wasn't prepared enough for the first one, and I think I lacked a little bit of confidence for the first one, and those two things probably influenced each other. But it just wasn't ideal, and I didn't get that job, right? Like so, interviewing is tough, um, and I think that we all have different things that we can do to make ourselves feel more confident, whether that's preparing a script for yourself or whatever, or you know whatever that looks like. I think knowing what you need to do so that you feel confident, but also please make sure that you're being yourself, and you really want to make sure that if you're getting hired somewhere or offering yourself to work somewhere, that it's a culture that will work for you. And I think that if I got hired in that first at that first place with that first interview, I probably would have hated it just because it was a very aggressive culture. So, the second one and the one, like, the one where, I'm talking to my network or people that I know, like, I'm more myself. I'm less worried about saying everything right and just speaking to my experience, like, I don't know, I feel like I'm not making too much sense, but, I don't know. Did that answer your question? I feel like I'm too tired.
No, no worries. I know it's like 'cause it was. I'm sure there were a lot of interviews and a lot of different roles and jobs. No, that's good. I'm just asking about like your overall experience, and you could also maybe tell us in terms of the types of interviews. Was it in your case, like for example, for the first role that you got, so that contract? Was it mostly just fit, or did you do portfolio presentation? Did you do any whiteboarding challenges? Did you do anything else?
Nope, no whiteboarding challenges for the contracting stuff. It was mostly through, people knew me, they knew my work, and they knew what kind of they knew my level of skill. So, it was, a network, it was very much easier because I didn't necessarily have to sell myself. It was just a matter of understanding what their needs were and whether I could fit, like that kind of thing. I have had to do whiteboard challenges. Um, we did learn how to do whiteboard challenges in the program, and it was very helpful in as much as like it helps you understand how to break apart a problem and then present your thinking in a way that is collaborative and, like, and rapid. I don't love whiteboarding challenges, to be honest. I find them really, especially if you're not, like, in person doing them, um, they're not the best, right? Like, for me, I just but that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how to do it, and I would definitely practice that. So I was asked in one interview to actually, like, come up with my own problem statement and, like, present that to the team and then whiteboard that, whereas, usually the other way around, like, they'll give you a challenge and they'll say, "This is the challenge, how would you solve it?" And you would just pick apart that and tell them your problem solving. And I thought that was odd, but that did happen to me. Um And, I did get called back for another interview for that one, but I ended up not taking that job. It was yeah. You learn as much from the team about the team as they will about you when you're doing these things.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah, that's good. And by the way, Gleska, thank you for the comment. So she said, "You are totally making sense. How wonderful you are in a place that allows you to be you."
yeah. Yes, I must say love um, I will say it again, culture is extremely important, and even if you're doing something you love, if the culture doesn't suit you, it's, it's a lot harder to be your best creative self. So please keep that in mind when you're interviewing. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
All right. Okay, awesome. So let's take Anne Marie's question. Are networking events that useful for making connections that lead to jobs, or are most of your connections that have led to jobs been related to friends and work colleagues you know more personally? What level of closeness have you found is appropriate when asking for help with job searching? Good question.
Yeah, good question. I think both, like, I've had people referred to me, through their network, right? And this has just happened this week. There's a networking, event at work and somebody's husband is getting into UX and they were referred to me because I'm part of the this UX team. Um and like that is just as likely to be a hireable connection as someone that that I know better. Like when I say know better, I know from past work experience. And I will say though that it's usually someone that's referred to me. So like very, very light ties. Like I barely know them. I just know them through, people that I work with. Um, and then there's people that I worked closely with and we've gone our separate ways and, we keep in touch um, and you get opportunities that way too. And I think both are really important. Both can provide the same results. I don't think one is any necessarily better than the other. One's probably easier to talk to than the other, right? Like you have a little bit more background with somebody, you know their communication style, et cetera. So that might be a little bit easier, but I would say, oh,
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great point. And also, and Marie, to add to that, it's um, I would also well, first of all, a great book that I typically suggest on networking specifically is Never Eat Alone. Sorry, by Keith Ferrazzi. So maybe Mika, if you could please put that in the chat. Not affiliated or anything, unfortunately, maybe. But it reframed my way of looking at networking, right? Because I did not really like my initial impression of networking is this thing, you just go to an event, you exchange cards, and then you contact somebody when you need help, right? That's what like a lot of people think about networking. But it reframed it as relationship building, right? And basically becoming this kind of like almost like a super connector, if you want to, and thinking how you can, like, if you actually click with someone, and then how you can help them and how they can help you potentially in the future. And if it's like building a deeper relationship. And the reason I'm talking about all this is you can turn such people from those networking events into your closer network, right? So someone you know better, right? And that can be quite effective, right? And that's what really helped me kind of reframe the way I look at it and enjoy the process. So not just doing the superficial business card exchanges and trying to speak with 50 people for 3 seconds, but better speaking with like 5 people, but in more depth. And then you click with somebody, and usually, typically, I would say, I think it's more common that only if you click with someone, that is more, in that case, it's more likely to actually lead to something like a job or a referral, etc. Right? So just to add to that. So Never Eat Alone, then Give and Take by Adam Grant, another great book on the topic. I did not actually read the whole thing. I just read the summary and I think first couple of chapters. And of course, the favorite one that I recommend all the time about informational interviews and networking and building the network is the 2-Hour Job Search. That one is great as well, by Steve Dalton. It gives you an exact system how to reach out to people, what to tell them, how to build relationships, how not to seem needy, because if you're basically just desperately reaching out asking for jobs, like most people, they will not be helping or talking much, unfortunately. Especially like people who I'm talking about people who you don't know yet, right? So you want to build out those relationships with informational interviews and kind of, basically see if things click, and then it can potentially lead to jobs. All right. So hopefully that was useful. Stacey, any thoughts on that? Want to add anything?
yeah, there is a network, like there are opportunities on LinkedIn too. There is a networking group. It's mostly around product design and so it's product owners, UX people, like all of that kind of product sort of centric area. And it's called Never Search Alone. And
Never eat.
no, Never Search Alone.
That's something else.
It's a
Oh,
totally different group, and I would say I started doing that, I was in a cult like working doing great work, but in a culture that I didn't love, and I was like, "Okay, I gotta go. I gotta go somewhere else," whether it's somewhere else in this company or somewhere else completely, and that is all about networking, and it talks through different, ways of finding your brand, your own personal brand, and et cetera, and I think that that is also worth looking into because it really does emphasize the network, and you will be grouped with people that are, sort of searching for jobs like you.
okay. Okay. All right. So that's great. So we are running a bit short on time, so we'll be taking some additional questions. So again, please put your questions in Q&A. I do have a couple of questions for Stacy as well, and then we'll be making that special announcement that I told you about and wrapping things up. So Stacy, I know you're very modest, right? It seems like you're almost like one of those people who are under promise, over deliver, undersell, over deliver. But I have to ask you this question. In your opinion, what were the like 3 to 5 things that made you more marketable and attractive to employers and made you stand out?
Um, I think, well, I have a lot of, I have a broad range of experience, and I also, I spend a lot of time looking into and learning how to like talk about my mind. Like I know this happens to be right here because I just finished this book and I'm not necessarily pushing it, but it is a good book where I could talk about um and explain if someone asked me a question about why I made choices, in my portfolio or whatever, I could easily define that. I can easily define it better now that I've been working on that. But I think that those two things helped a lot. And you said 5 things, and I just can't think of 5 things. Like,
Three to five, 3 to 5.
what helped me? It, you know, I, this is important, and it is sort of tangential, but I will say this. Remember that when you are working, regardless of who you're working with, you will meet these people, or you will meet these people in the future. So please stay professional. Make sure that, like when you're working with people that you're considering not just that moment and how you're feeling, but how you're making people feel and how they will talk about you. If you happen to be referred to someone like you happen to be referred to them in their industry, right? Every interaction is important, and you really have to remember, um, that, right? And I don't know if that truly makes sense, but I I find that people forget that what they say and what they do in a single moment can like ripple out and affect them for years. Like so,
Yeah. And don't burn the bridges, right?
yeah, yeah.
All right. So that's cool. All right. So overall, what do you think? I know I gotta ask you that in the beginning, but I also wanted to ask you a similar question once we kind of covered much more of your journey. Overall, what were some of the like biggest challenges on your way to that first job? How did you overcome those, and what were the biggest lessons and takeaways?
The thing I struggled with most was just not being confident enough and feeling like I could actually, under pressure, um, speak to my work and why I made the choices I did, because I had reasons, right? But if I get nervous, I forget, and oh, they're looking at me, like that kind of thing. That was my biggest challenge. It was just being confident and being sometimes like remembering to be myself, like that it was gonna be okay, right? And I can do anything for 30 minutes or whatever, and it'll be okay. So being it was hard for me to get over that sort of fear, or that imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
But, outside of that, I think once I got past that, it was a lot easier for me. And also that you don't have to have an answer for everything. Like, I think saying you don't know, or that, like, "Oh, I know I did this wrong," is really, once you recognize that that is a strength rather than a weakness, I think, and it was a hard thing for me to do. That was hard, and now that I can do that, it's a lot easier, just doing work generally, even outside of UX.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So that's good. Um, all right. So I want to also ask everyone if you have any other before we wrap up, start wrapping up. any other burning questions that you really hope to like get an answer to, or something you're struggling with maybe, or you're joining the event and you wanted to learn X, maybe is there something that you haven't learned so far that you want to ask? So feel free to just pop that into Q&A or the chat. Make an exception. And yeah, we'll take that as well. Also, Stacy, any additional mistakes or lessons you want to mention that you maybe made along the way that you could help others avoid? Maybe specifically about like search and interviewing, or just in general.
Okay. As far as interviewing and searching, I think being thoughtful about your search rather than just like applying to everything that you see is important, right? It might feel better to like feel like you're doing something by sending out a bunch of resumes, but I'm pretty certain that's probably not the way to go. And I would say that was a mistake that a trap that I fell into. It's when I was starting to feel anxious, and I think that the more you can craft your messaging around the role that you're looking at, the more likely you are going to get a job. So I would say that was a mistake. Like, right, I thought the more I sent out, the better it would be, and it just isn't the case. Lessons. I don't know, Michael. I feel like I'm not helpful here.
No, it's okay. I mean, I'm just asking about your experience, your journey, and
Yeah.
it's not like you have written a book about this here.
No,
At least not yet.
no.
All right. So that's cool. So we'll take one more question. I think Disha put a question here in the chat. So I'll take that, and then I have one final question for you, and then we'll be wrapping up. So Disha was asking, so it's like a broader, more like bigger question, basically. What specific skills, projects, or case studies have you seen make a candidate stand out in the UX hiring process this year, especially with the rise of AI? And if you went through any of that, Stacey, if you had any of like such candidates that you look at, like, can you think of anyone?
Yeah, I'm guessing you're thinking about AI in as much as it's making the design. So the things that make a case study stand out to me, I will say, aren't necessarily you have to show skill, like a competence level in what you're asking to be hired for. Of course, we need that, right? So if it's more visual in emphasis, you have to be able to show that. But I mean, I really want to see genuinely that you understand how to ask questions, understand a problem before you just, I really want to see that critical thinking and that understanding of a problem space before a solution is made. Because just like that superficial, like it seems sort of generic kind of solution to a problem is it doesn't it does I don't love that, like, and it might be because the work that I do is so very like the products I work in are so complex, and there's so many different workflows and problems and intricacies to it. Like that needing to understand the why behind the problem and the opportunities available to solve that is so important for me to want to hire somebody. So that's what make things stand out, like that understanding of a problem space, not just a sort of like a generic solution, and a very beautiful but generic solution is not something that I like to see.
Yeah. Okay. And by the way, what I was gonna comment on, every time you hear the dog bark, that means it's like the most insightful answer, right? All right. If you guys didn't know, that was the purpose. to the highlights. All right. All right. So before we wrap up, Stacy, so any like final top three pieces of advice for people transition into UX and looking to land their first UX role?
I would say you have a lot of skills that you don't realize are marketable as a UX professional. Um, and uh, you have to kind of realize that. So look at your skills. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Like you used to manage people, and you could bring the best out of it. Like take skills that you have and then pivot them, or like put them through the lens of a user experience sort of task or piece of that user experience sort of pie, and say, I can do this because my experience in that. And, like I can do research because of my experience in management or whatever. So I'd say, look at all your skills. Don't discount yourself because you might not have as much experience as you think, because you have more than you think. I will say user experience is like an ambiguous space. It's always like, why and what? And, there's so many ways to solve a problem. You can do a wireframe, or you can do, like you can solve it by, I don't know. There's so many ways to do it. So just know that there's no right answer. It's the answer that you pick, or the tool that you use to get to a solution. It's not about the artifact. It's about getting to the answer and doing that thoughtfully and right so that it solves a user problem. Um, those are two things.
All right. So thank you so much, Stacy. This was awesome. And by the way, Urja, thank you for your kind comment here. So I'm gonna read it in the chat. So Urja was saying thank you for all the great insights, Stacy. I really got many answers from your journey and experiences. I'm kind of doing all the mistakes that you mentioned. It's really very kind of you to that you shared really great tips and tricks. Urja, that was very kind of you to share such a nice comment too.
But, there's a lot of people on LinkedIn. I'm one of those people that will like give you time, like 30 minutes, and talk through your resume or your portfolio. There's people out there that will offer their time. Like I always love to give back. You'll find that a lot in user experience because it's so interactive and collaborative. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask for it, but also when asking, be clear about what your goals are and what you need, so that whoever you're talking to can give you what you need and not feel like they don't know what you're asking for, or how they can help you, right? Like help them help you. So when you're leveraging your network, please just like go in with an agenda and say, this is where I need some guidance. This is what I need help with. Can you help me with these things? I need feedback on this thing.
Awesome. And another fun comment from Anne Marie here. Stacy, you were operating very well in an interview under pressure right now.
Well, I know Michael was easier if he was a complete stranger.
All right. So yeah, so thank you so much, Stacy. Hope you guys enjoyed the event and got some great insights. So as promised, people often ask about our program, not the course, as promised earlier. So as promised earlier, let me also quickly tell you about this program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial soft skills like team collaboration, client management, and presentation, along with the career prep to master UX job search and interviewing, so you can actually land a UX role. So who this program is best for? The program is the best fit for ambitious people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related backgrounds, and look to transition into UX in one of the most effective and efficient ways, and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. So we ran many cohorts and helped about 160 people by now transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by many companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Meta, JP Morgan, and many, many more. The program was ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program for many years. So actually #1 this year, which is amazing. Thank you, SwitchUp. And also featured in Fortune magazine and on ADP list. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, The Economist, and many others. What you gain after completing the program is build not just hard skills, but the critical softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and master UX job search and interviewing so you can actually land a UX job. And in fact, our grads have done so well that we offer a money back guarantee. So you either land a UX job or get your tuition back, plus an extra $500 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginnings.com. Our cohorts are quite small and fill up pretty quickly. So please act soon. Otherwise, even if you're a great candidate, sometimes you may still end up on the wait list. And also to thank everyone in our community who attended this event, you'll be eligible for an extra $500 tuition credit, if accepted, of course. To claim that credit, what you need to do is by tomorrow, go to the website. You'll see the link in the chat. So Mika is going to put that there for you and request a free, no commitment career transition consultation where we will do a first UX job hireability assessment for you. So if you've already done that, you're all set. And by the way, these sessions, they're designed to not just be some kind of like quick program pitch, right? So there's actually none of that in the first session. They're designed to take a look at your background, skills, and experience, identify what is possible for you to do to become a highly hireable UX candidate, uncover the key bottlenecks restricting your UX career transition progress, create a personalized action plan that will get you results, and also see if you may be a good fit for our UX Career Accelerator program. All right. So in addition to telling you about the program, I also wanted to briefly mention that we frequently run different types of virtual events. So we'll keep you updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that's usually sent every week or two or so. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful guest for taking the time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you here, Stacy. Yeah. And by the way, Stacy, what is the best way for folks who would like to connect with you to find you? Is that LinkedIn or some other way? Any other way?
It's probably LinkedIn. Just shoot me a little note, when you connect.
Okay. Okay.
Be excellent. Yeah, but LinkedIn is probably best.
All right. Awesome. All right. So thank you so much. We'll see you guys at the next event. Great to have you, Stacy.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.